Warning: the following content contains material some viewers may not find suitable. Viewer discretion is advised. A lot of people like to listen to stories that are purported to be true, mainly because the idea that something can actually happen to you is oftentimes more frightening than the idea of a monster hiding under your bed. The fear of the unknown is actually really frightening to me. However, you can't really discredit those stories of close encounters with that creepy person or with that police officer who happens to be a pedophile. These are 10 Let's Not Meet stories, 10 true tales purported by the users of the Reddit Let's Not Meet. So please sit back, turn the lights down, and prepare to be scared as we tell you these 10 stories. The Mall Nightshift. Okay, a little backstory before I tell you some of these crazy experiences of mine that happened during my 2-year security career from 2013 to 2015. I am a 6'7" male in Australia, and I'd like to think that I'm fairly tough and a decently intimidating guy, but some of this shit that used to go on at the mall I used to work at, the night shift still gives me a little goosebumps to this day. So the mall I worked at was very large, and I mean very large, probably the largest in my state, I'd have to say, and all the way up to about 8:30 p.m. it would be still quite busy. Only around 9:30 would we manage to usher all the stragglers out, and only at about 11 p.m. would all the business owners have left, and my job was basically to patrol the mall and make sure that there was no one sticking around after the doors had closed during the night. We didn't have guns or batons, only a can of mace that was, well, rarely used. There were multiple occasions where we would find a would-be thief hiding or trying to break into shops after dark, but they were normally far outnumbered by about 4 to 5 of us on a night shift at a time, and they would be intimidated by me or some of the other imposing members of security. This one night though, this one fucking night, shit started getting really weird on me on one of the night shifts. So I say it was about 2 o'clock, and I was standing in the middle of the empty food court eating a sandwich. This is the only part of the mall that had any light at nighttime due to the skylight, so it was comfortable to eat there. While I was eating through, I heard a dull scraping noise in the hallway leading off from one of the food courts and to some toilets. It sounded like a piece of metal dragging across the floor. I immediately put on edge and I flicked my torch, which is a flashlight to those Americans out there, without a moment of hesitation. I can remember creeping down the hallway, flashlight in hand, illuminating a good 6 or 7 meters in front of me. As I got closer and closer to the end of the hall, the noise became louder and louder until I was at the end of the hallway, and there was the toilet doors to the left and right of me. I could tell that the sound was coming from the female toilets. I gripped the handle, opened the door, only a tiny little crack. The noise is now very clear, and at this point, I had not been scared. But I was confused, so I yelled, "Hello? Who's in there?" in a very intimidating way. The noise quickly stopped. I paused for a moment, listening through the crack of the door, still gripping the handle tightly, and then I flicked on my radio. "Hey, this is 1213. I need help in the food court bathrooms. I think someone's in there." I got no response, and this is really strange, as it put me on further edge. Policy was to always answer radio, and now I was truly becoming alarmed. "Hello? This is 13, anyone copy?" Still no response. I remember whispering to myself, what in the actual fuck? I again opened the door a tiny crack. "Listen, mate," I said, sounding as intimidating as possible. "If you don't fucking come out with your hands up, You're gonna end up eating your teeth tonight. Do you really want that? I sat at the door, quite honestly terrified at this point, but there was no response. In fact, there was no noise at all. I yelled into the bathroom one more time. Okay, I'm coming in. If you do anything stupid, it's not my fault if you never walk again. I tried my hardest to sound as scary as possible, but my voice is quivering at this point. This whole situation made no sense at all, and it really was the fear of the unknown that got me on edge. Could I have a gun? Nah, that's not stuff that really happens here. Why would someone be in the female bathrooms? What was that metallic noise? What in the actual fuck was even happening? I very slowly opened the door and scanned my flashlight across the room. All the cubicles were wide open. Weird. But other than that, the rooms are totally empty. I was totally shitting myself about now. I was definitely losing it. I walked into the center of the bathroom, closing the door behind me, scared to the core, and I let out a faint, "This is some horror movie shit. Alright, come out." When I heard the long, whining squeak from the door behind me, I spanned around, basically crying at this point, and shone my torch at the fucking massive man. He was at least a head taller than me, and it seemed that in my state, at the time, he was Caucasian and at least in his mid-40s, matted gray hair down all over his forehead. He was mid-opening the door, but he stopped dead still in the middle of his actions. He just looked at me, smiling this guilty fucking smile like a kid would when he gets caught stealing biscuits or some shit like that. I'm not gonna lie, I was scared. I froze. He lifted his finger up to his mouth and simply said, "Shh," before swinging the door open all the way and sprinting out with what looked like to be some sort of metal box in hand. Turns out, he was just behind the toilet door when I was opening it, and I totally fucking missed him. I was so fucking close to him, and I didn't even fucking notice him. He could have killed me, he could have had a knife or something, and that thought still haunts me to this day. Later that night, my radio miraculously started working again, and I got right on to telling my coworkers about this story. They collectively went pale when I told them what happened. They all had similar stories, but none were as close and as cut-knit as mine. I worked the night shift for about another week, and then I simply quit. I'm not sticking around with a job like that. I needed help, and for some reason my radio fucked itself. Why? So, weird guy in the toilets, let's not meet again.
Why do train stations attract weirdos? I travel to the city semi-frequently for pubs and clubs, and the worst part about that is having to catch public transport there and back. The trips aren't that bad, but the waiting is. I don't know if it's common in other places, but the stations I go through often have weirdos. Once, a guy stood at the top of the stairs talking about how the Lord has damned us and various things from the Revelations Bible book would be raining down upon us. He repeated lots of phrases like, "the world is ending," and spoke to no one in particular, really. I assume he was on some shit. Another guy was sat in front of a crowd of people during a pretty congested time, singing what sounded like fairly good opera. I'm no fair judge, though, and rocking back and forth. Even as the train pulled up and people walked past him, he just sat there, singing and rocking. The last notable one was just the other day. A guy was pacing around a grouping of chairs while the station was pretty empty, and a few friends and I were sitting on one of the benches in his circle. He was muttering under his breath the whole time, just the same thing over and over. I think it was extinguish the scars or something like that. When our train came, the last one of the night, he jogged back down the stairs away from the platform. There have been a few others, but mostly just junkies doing much less interesting things. These three are the ones I remember best.
A Finger Across the Throat by Hadeep Smai. I'll start by saying that I grew up in a small town in England, and, just like anywhere else, everywhere has their fair share of rough areas. In this particular town, the majority are seen as rough. I used to hang out about what I now know as the wrong crowd. These thugs didn't go out and have a good time. They went out to commit crimes, theft, assault, general assholery, and everyone in the borough knew their names and their reputation. But me and a friend, being the idiots that we were, chose to suddenly hang out around them. Life lessons, right? Anyway, all of a sudden, and for no reason whatsoever, they turned on us. They'd invite us out to make it seem like they wanted us there, but, in fact, it was only to bully and belittle us, and this just got progressively worse. Me and my best mate used to frequent the under-18 nightclubs around town, and these thugs used to pool outside near closing time to wait for us to come out. At first, it was mainly bickering and shouting across the street, but this quickly progressed. Soon it was pushing, scrapping, and attempts to jump us. Basically 10 more lads attacking one person, but to no avail, until one day, they managed to get my best mate and promptly beat the shit out of him right in front of the club. I feel so guilty for legging it out of there just as soon as it kicked off, but he never had any hard feelings about it, and managed to get away somehow. Only with a few bumps and cuts. The next encounter, though, is significant. We'd been in an under-18 nightclub, and up the road from the last attack, we were having a great time, thinking they wouldn't know because we had switched venues, but they knew. And because of their notoriety, news spread around the club fast, and we quickly found out that there were like 30 or 40 lads outside waiting for us. Fuck this shit, I'm not leaving the club. We notified the bouncers, and thankfully they let us stay there until my dad was able to come and pick us up from the front door, who I'd phoned. So me and my mate get in the car, and the only way out is to drive past them. They're banging on the window, and most of them are putting their fingers across their throats, which we all know what that signifies, but being our daft selves, we decided to shrug it off as idle threats. That wasn't until a week later. While we were in high school, it was all over the local news. A shop owner on a precinct near where we both live was brutally attacked and killed by a group of 20 or so kids, battered with metal pipes, pool cues, whatever was long and solid, along with multiple stamps and whatnot. That was when we realized that the threat was very real. They tried using their usual tactic of inviting us during the period of time between leaving the club and the murder, but we'd refused for obvious reasons. About 12 lads were arrested on murder suspicions and 4 were locked up for it, some for accessory, some for stuff less serious. Close call. Not sure if the main culprits are out of prison yet, but a life sentence in England usually means 25 years, only serving 2/3 and maybe less for good behavior. And this was about 12 years ago, so who knows. Hope to God they've forgotten, which I'm confident they have, but God help me if I accidentally cross their paths.
Coffee Shop Creeper. I used to work at a small, drive-through only coffee shop kiosk. We had a large but loyal following of regular customers who would come in at least once or twice a day. Most of us were young, fairly pretty women ranging from 18 to 30 years old, and because of that nature, or because of the nature of our work, we were incredibly bubbly and sweet to the customers. Male customers especially took this the wrong way. In one particular case was an old man who had been a regular customer since long before we started here. We call him Bob. For the first 2 years that I worked there, he was slightly flirtatious with all of us, but nothing hinted that it was nothing but grandfatherly kindness. He would always come once a day, buy a large cup of light roast coffee, black, and then he'd stay and make small talk about the weather for a brief moment, and then start to drive off for the rest of his day. Well, all of that changed in the summer of my 3rd year. Bob started coming through the line more frequently, and staying for much more longer than he'd ever have. He'd come through once for his coffee, and then again just to chat. Myself and other co-workers were quick to set up boundaries with him, making an excuse about needing to do cleaning, tasks, or prep work, and an order so that he would just leave. Our manager, however, was much more of a bleeding heart. He reminded her of her dead grandfather, and they bonded over losing lost loved ones. Breast cancer, especially. Slowly, he started to get more personal with my manager, sometimes staying and talking with her for over half an hour. And that would be longer if we weren't busy. At the time, I really didn't think too much of it, and when I reflect back on it now, it seems very strange for some sort of stranger to do, but at the time, it just seemed normal. One morning, though, I was opening alone, and I thought I saw what looked like his car drive by, and then slow down, then speed up, and then drive off, as I was walking into the shop. On weekdays, we'd open at 6 a.m., which meant that we needed to be up before 5:30 a.m. to get things prepped and ready. It was almost always pitch dark, and I'd be alone for the first hour until my manager would come in. I started to keep my eye out for his car in the morning, and I noticed it at least twice a week at any time between 5:45 and at 6 in the morning. Me and my manager actually traded first and second shifts very frequently, so there was no way to consistently know who would be there at 5:30 and who would be there at 6:30. He must have been looking for her. After about a month of this, I mentioned it to my manager, and she let out a big sigh and said she thought she was crazy and seeing things until I shared my concerns. We'd seen him watching us, and it creeped us out, but we were sure that he was harmless. We agreed not to talk about it during employee hours to customers for safety reasons. A while after that, he came through when I was alone, just after we opened at about 6:15, and then started talking to me about my manager. He casually mentioned where her house was. My ears perked up, and I knew I had to get him out of there before she arrived. Luckily, one of the owners pulled up in the line behind him, and I quickly said, there's my boss. Better get back to work, and he drove off. As soon as my manager arrived, I told her about what happened, and she immediately got scared and started taking him seriously as a threat. She has 4 children at home, and she never told him where he lived at any point, so this meant he followed her, and he knew her kids' names from the stories she told him. He knew what color her house was. He told me. Went to preservation mode, calling the owners, letting them know about the situation, which they brushed off. He was a good customer and spent a few $100s there a year. Surely this was my manager's fault, the owners would say, so she called out a friend who is married to a sheriff. He surely would put out a notice to the city police should they find a man fitting the description and a vehicle was seen out in her neighborhood. By far the scariest part was when we learned that no one by his name in, this town was registered. He'd been a member of our coffee shop online rewards program for years, but the name he'd used for it was fake. What was the plan? After a few months, basically hiding my manager from him, he stopped coming by. To my knowledge, it's been 1.5 years since he's been to the coffee shop, but I wonder who the hell he really was. And what he would have done if we hadn't intervened. So, creepy coffee shop guy, let's not meet again.
Thanks for letting me walk with you guys. Me and my best friend visited London last year. Using the map of the city, we got from the hotel to various touristy attractions, either by walking or taking the tube. It was getting dark, and we wanted to see Trafalgar Square. We looked at the map and so it was only a few blocks away, so we decided to walk. So, we walked through the crowded London street, trying not to get separated in the sea of Londoners and other tourists. After a particularly large group of people walked by us, I felt someone behind me. Through my peripheral vision, I saw a person behind us, walking directly between me and my friend, keeping pace with us. I couldn't tell who it was, but all I knew was that they were tall. Now there were dozens of people around us walking in the same direction we were, but what was off about this person was how close they were to us. To an onlooker, it would have looked like the three of us were walking together or something. We stop at a crosswalk, waiting for the light to change. The stranger stands behind us, much too close. Me and my friend are looking straight forward. I could tell by her posture that she also noticed this person behind us. The light changes, and we both cross the street, walking as fast as we can, trying to put some distance between us and this stranger. I turn my head, pretending to look at the cars so I can catch a glimpse of this person. It was a very tall woman in a long black jacket. This is perhaps naive of me, but the fact that it was a woman made me feel a little more at ease. That, and when we reached the other side of the street, she was a fair distance behind us. I thought with relief that I was just being paranoid. She wasn't following us. As soon as this thought entered my head, I felt her behind us once again. We walked in utter silence the rest of the way. I was panicking. I'm still a rigid mess when we finally reached Trafalgar Square. Then, the woman behind us finally speaks, startling me and my friend, and says, "Thanks for letting me walk with you girls." She smiles kindly and walks away. My friend and I stare at each other, completely dumbfounded. In case this wasn't common sense, if you decide to walk with people you don't know for safety, freaking tell them!
The Creepy Guy in the Hall by T.D. Mary 1. This is something that happened to me when I was 4 or 5 years old, but I still remember it to this day. We used to live in this apartment complex near Northwood Village. I remember it as being fairly decent, quiet. Nothing really bad happened there. Needless to say, I wasn't really expecting what happened. The halls in my building were usually empty, so I would often be alone. Walking, running, playing ding-dong ditch, just the usual things that little kids do when they're bored. One day, I was walking in the halls and I see this guy. I still remember what he looked like. He had white, messy hair, wearing denim jacket, and no shirt with a pair of jeans. He was also barefoot. As I walked closer, I saw that his fly was open, exposing his bare, erect penis. We didn't exchange words, didn't even look at each other. He just breezed right on by me, staring straight ahead. For whatever reason, I didn't find this encounter creepy, until I told my sister about it. She then went on to tell me that she'd come across this guy while sitting on a flight of stairs in a different building. Same clothes, same situation, but this time, he was pouring water all over his penis while telling his sister it tastes like candy. Thank God nothing happened to my sister that day, but I'm beginning to get anxious at the thought of what could have happened. I have no idea what happened to this guy, as I never saw him again after my encounter, but I will never forget him.
The eyes should have warned me. Over the 2 years, I have collected a whole lot of strange, funny, and unexplained creepy stories. Generally, I'd save them for a person to tell a, well, creepy story to, and then I noticed a story on the front page requesting these accounts, so I made my way here to tell a strange tale of what happened to me, something somewhat recently. I changed my username so as to not contact these people with my real identity. Over the past few years, I've been living in Athens, Greece. Not exactly the most secure and stable environment. In Athens, anything really can happen. And for me, staying past my visa, I could have very well been deported if swooped up. Couple this with me being involved in politics and a journalist of sorts, I had a healthy paranoia regarding watching my back. My surroundings and being secure in them were very paramount to me. In Greek culture, when someone gives you the eyes, it signifies trouble. There is actually a word for it, which I'm not remembering at the moment. I am completely sorry. But if someone stares you down, you watch your back. That is where the story starts, but doesn't really end. One morning last year, I departed for a brief morning ritual of picking up coffee and breakfast to take home. As I was walking down the street, two people were standing in my way. The girl locked eyes with me. Her eyes didn't leave me as I walked by. She stared straight at me for what seemed like an eternity, jerking her head, and just kept staring at me as I walked by. I was not feeling good about this encounter, and on the way back, I decided to walk around that block. So if they were there, I would be coming up behind them. Honestly, I have never been stared at like that by a stranger before. I turned a corner, and they are no longer there. Good, I think to myself, as I'm walking up to the exact spot where the encounter happened. However, across the street, in an alley, a girl is rushing towards a small road, and she locks eyes with me, and she screams, "Help! Help! Help!" Of course, I notice instantly, and she is speaking English, perfect English, without even a Greek accent, and at this point, many thoughts are running through my head. I back onto the street so I could turn around and run if I need to, and I ask, "What's wrong?" She immediately calls out and said, "I just came from the German embassy. Can you take me to the foreign tax office?" I flat out told her no, and that it's simply 2 blocks down the road. At this point, she keeps reiterating that I need to help her. I start to walk away, and she follows me and says, "I'm going to follow you to the tax office." And I say, "No, again, I'm not going there. I'm not even going in that direction," which she responds with, I notice you have dry skin. I can help you or teach you how to fix that." At this point, I just start to walk away, and she just gives up. I've never seen her again, but I doubt she really wanted help getting to the tax office. Anyway, creepy dry skin girl. Let's not meet again.
The events in this story took place about 2 months ago, and I'm still not fully able to be home by myself. Alright, background information is pretty important to my story, so I'll go over that quickly. I live in a typical suburban neighborhood, with most houses being lined up pretty close to each other. New homes are still being built on most streets, the empty lot next door to me being one of them. There were usually about 7 to 10 construction workers working at the lot next door, and most of the time they didn't even acknowledge us. Some would say hello or wave, but for the most part they just kept to themselves. One morning, as I was climbing into my car to go to a 9:30 a.m. class, I was stopped by one of the construction workers. He walked over to my car and leaned over my open door. This guy was short and stocky, with a bushy beard. He looked to be in his late 40s or so, and I could tell, even from where he was standing, that he was a smoker. He had a clipboard in one hand and a walkie-talkie in the other, and wore a typical yellow construction helmet. I looked next door and only saw 2 other workers at the very back of the lot, but there usually was only a handful there in the early morning. But this guy just kind of stood there, not saying anything at first. You live here, right? At this house?" he asked. He sounded strangely anxious and kept glancing at the lot. I thought this was an odd question, considering he just watched me exit my house, and would assumingly have watched me do this every day. I answered yes, I did live there, and tried to close my car door as politely as I could. He gripped it, stopping me. "And, how noisy has it been? The construction, is it disruptive?" he asked. He kept talking like he couldn't remember what to say. I told him that the noise didn't bother us and yanked my car door closed. He held onto it tighter and continued asking me questions. If construction materials had been left in our yard, if the crew had been littering, etc. I told him we had no complaints and asked him to move out of the way. "And what time of the day are you usually at the house?" he asked in a more assertive tone. This made me feel extremely uncomfortable, and I quickly lied that it was different every day. I finally yanked the door out of his hands and drove away. I had stopped to get some food with a friend after school, so I ended up getting home at around 6:30 p.m. that afternoon. I pulled up to an empty driveway, my brothers being at work, and my parents probably still on their way home. A pickup truck was still parked next door, which was odd. The crew never stayed this late. I didn't think much of it though, and made sure to lock up when I got inside. I headed upstairs and spent the next 20 minutes on my laptop, when I heard a bang downstairs. I have 3 cats who like to get into our metal garbage can, so I assumed it was them knocking it over again. I was halfway down the stairs when I heard a groan and someone curse under their breath. My heart nearly leapt into my throat. I peeked around the railing of our stairs and saw a figure trying to force his way through my sliding glass door. There was a metal bar installed on the track of our patio door, which only allowed the door to slide less than a foot open. The figure was trying to maneuver his way through this crack in the doorway, grunting and swearing all the time. I pulled out my phone to call the police, but my phone fell out of my hands and down the stairs, crashing with each step. He froze and looked at me, and began trying even harder to get into the house. I could tell right away that it was the construction worker from earlier. He was nearly halfway in when my parents pulled into the driveway. He saw the headlights and immediately wiggled his way back out, running into the woods behind my house. Oh, as you can imagine, my parents went insane. I gave a detailed description to my parents, who then went to the construction company and tried to identify the man. But nobody at the construction company matched the description, or even knew of someone who matched it. The uniform I had described did not match theirs, and they said they didn't ask neighbors questions while building the homes. This guy posed as a construction worker, intending to either rob us or worse. As of now, we still have no idea who this man was. Take this as a warning. Always ask anybody in uniform, a cop, a construction worker, an electrician, anyone, for some sort of identification before offering them information or inviting them into your home.
Help Me, I'm Drowning, by Blackeyed Blondie. I find this encounter to be especially creepy to me, because I had forgotten it for years. I only remembered this after telling my boyfriend a different story about my childhood, and it all came back to me. It happened when I was 6 years old, not long after my parents separated and I was living with my mother. My mother never really believed in leaving me with a babysitter or nanny, so she was a stay-at-home mom her entire life. When my parents divorced, my mother needed work but refused to leave me alone, so I was often dragged along with her doing odd jobs and driving all over town. My mom mostly cleaned up nice houses, but she would also try selling stuff to consignment shops, dumpster diving, cashing in recyclables, etc. During these outings, I was just tuning everything out and drawing the whole day, so I didn't always know what was going on. But this particular day, I was doodling away intently when we stopped at a yard sale in a run-down-looking neighborhood. I remember seeing a woman and her son running the table. The boy was a bit older than me. I would say he's about the age boys start going through puberty, because he had started a tiny mustache on his upper lip. My mom loads up her car with a bunch of stuff, and I climb into the front seat. I'm about to start drawing in my notebook again when I notice this boy is getting in the car with us. I have no idea if my mom even knew the family at all, and I suspect she didn't. All I knew now was that their son was coming with us. I didn't ask my mom. She was short-tempered with me, and I don't really remember talking to her much. When we get back to our house, my mom makes us both lunch and tells the boy Samuel to make himself at home. I take this opportunity to try and dash up to my bedroom and play, but Samuel asked me to come play with him in the garage. I thought it was weird that Sam wanted to play house with me so bad. I didn't care much for it, but I went along. He wanted us to pretend that we were married and said that to make it official by kissing. I refused and suggested we pretend to cook instead. Sam kept getting close to me and grabbing at me. I have older brothers who like to roughhouse, so I was pretty used to being annoyed by other boys, so I just shoved him out of the playhouse and shut the flimsy plastic door behind him. Now Sam is starting about all this stuff our imaginary house has, like a big pool, and he pretends to swim around in it. I'm trying to ignore him when he starts to pretend drown. He's acting so loud and dramatic, saying, "Help me, I'm drowning!" and lays on his back, gasping for air in front of the playhouse door. He keeps telling me to put my mouth on his and give him CPR to resuscitate him. At this point, I think he's the most annoying kid on the planet, and I step out of the playhouse just to go back inside my real house and play in my room. Just as I stomp out to leave Sam, he grabs my leg and starts trying to pull me down on top of him. I'm pulling away just as my mom comes in, and we both stop immediately. I'm honestly just as scared as she was. I knew something about this whole thing was wrong, but I thought I would get in trouble, so I kept quiet and went to my room. Minutes later, my brothers come home, and my mom leaves with Sam to take him back home. I luckily never had to see him again.
Aryan raced guy in the park. I am 24 now, and this happened to me when I was approximately 12 years old. I was at home with my sister and her friend, who were both around 9. My mom had gone out somewhere, and at the time, I swear to God, I can't remember where, but she said she would be gone for maybe 2 or 3 hours or so. I had asked if we could go into the park that was nearby our home at the time so we could go feed the little ducks. To get a better idea, the park I'm talking about was less of a park and more of a series of trails and secluded areas of dense trees, along with main trails that led into smaller trails that led into openings which had a lake and a pond. If I were to walk out into the middle of the lake and pond, the water would really only go up to my waist. Most of our houses in our neighborhood were backed into some sort of trail that led to this lake and pond. So my mom said we could as long as we didn't stay too long, and left a note on the table with the time we left the house and the time we returned. Me being 12, I was quite excited about being able to take care of 2 younger kids. Maybe I could even babysit. I mean, I would love to get paid to do something like that. And I was also excited to go out without parents. So we took our duck feed and headed out to the park. It is important to note that I'm quite fair-skinned, blue-eyed, with blonde hair. My sister and her friend were both a skin or maybe a shade or two darker, with brown hair, brown eyes. And we were all female. We headed out for an opening with a bench about 3 minutes from the start of the trail that had a great spot for feeding these ducks. Which, the spot happened to be our usual spot. As we approached the clearing, I saw a bike leaning against a tree. I remember feeling odd about it because 99% of the time we had walked to the spot and there was never anyone there, let alone a vehicle. As we entered the clearing, I saw an overweight, older man with a buzz-cut hair and a very distinct bright yellow rain jacket. I felt uncomfortable about this. However, a part of me wanted to be adult-like and be brave, so I did not choose to move to a different spot. I pretended that I did not feel uncomfortable, so I did not scare my sister and her friend. Both were sensitive and easy to scare kids. Trust me, I've pulled my fair share of pranks. And I gave them some duck feed to bring the ducks closer to us. As they approached the waterline, I hung back to keep an eye on the older man, who had not said anything to us at this point. After a few minutes, he kept talking to me. I can't exactly remember what he said, but it was things that were like, nice day to be out for a walk, or lots of ducks around here. He was quite enthusiastic with his approach and kept attempting to start a conversation. I was giving him small one-word answers to let him know that I was simply not interested in talking. I felt like it was way too weird to be talking to an older man, or an older man to be talking to girls as young as us. It was also weird because he refused to look or talk to the other two with me. After repeated attempts on his part to start a conversation, and many attempts at stopping it, I decided that I was simply too creeped out. I walked towards my sister and her friend, and told them that we were leaving. As I did this, the man simply shouted, "Wait! You look like a nice girl." At this point, I had stopped and turned around. Red flags were everywhere at this point. I looked at him, and all I said was, "Okay?" My sister and her friend at this point stopped, and we were, well, intently listening. To give you a visual, I was now standing between my sister and her friend, who were standing at the waterline of the lake, and the bench where the man was sitting. The man continued talking, but unfortunately, I don't remember a lot of what he said, because I was just too freaked out. I was formulating a plan if shit hit the fan. I would tell them to swim across the lake and run for home. I remember pretending to pay attention and nodding my head a lot. Then the man reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He gave it to me and asked me to read the paper, and then he said, "Think really hard about the message." I said, "Thanks, I'll do that when I get home." I dropped the paper onto the top of our duck feed bucket and pushed my sister and her friend in front and started walking away. As soon as we had left the clearing, I told them that we both needed to run home. Both of them were now freaking out because they knew about the whole interaction, and they knew that it was strange on some level, and they knew that I was not comfortable. I told them to run for home, while I logged the duck feed bucket with me and the weird paper. By the time we had gotten home, my mom was back, and my sister and her friend were now crying. My mom asked me what the hell happened, so I told her what happened and handed her the piece of paper I had been given. I watched her face as it started to read it, which she became visibly more distressed. She finally put down the paper and told me to go play with my sister. A while later, I still wondered about the note, so I went to go ask my mom what the heck it read. She asked me if I remembered what I learned from school about Hitler and World War II. I said yes, I do, and she told me what was in the note. It was a long explanation to why the Aryan race was superior, that only fair-skinned, blonde-haired, blue-eyed people were pure, and went on to say that we needed to rise up and join together to preserve our rightful place. Needless to say, my family does not believe that garbage, and it simply disturbed my mom. She phoned our police station and made a report, and they told her there had been multiple reports about this man doing this to other people that, well, matched the Aryan race, so to speak, and they were actively searching for him. So, creepy guy in the park. Let's not meet again.